Welcome to this Baptist News Global webinar. Here's your host, Mark Wingfield.
I'm Mark Wingfield, Executive Director and Publisher of Baptist News Global. And it is my pleasure today to finally get to have a conversation with my good friend, Carey Newman. We were supposed to do this a few weeks ago, and I had an illness that sort of set us back, but we're back on the horse, and here we are. And I've got to make a disclosure up front, just out of fairness, because I am a journalist. Carey and I have known each other for 30 plus years. So these are not two strangers talking. And if you happen to just catch us falling into, the secret language, someone send up a flag and we'll come back up. We used to live on the same street, as a matter of fact. And I knew his wife before I knew him. That's a whole nother story. We wouldn't have time for any of that, but our kids were born around the same time, and it's been a wonderful journey along the way. Carey, I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. And disclosure, your wife, I threw work to your wife.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she's still doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, still doing it. Yeah. Second part of that disclosure is my wife, Allison, is a proofreader and copy editor for Westminster John Knox Press, where Carey once upon a time worked. And we're going to talk about that at some point. But this is the new book. It's called Mango Tree. And the book is as cryptic as the title, I will say. My first question to you, Carey, is what the heck is this book? This is unlike anything I have ever read before.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So it's in one sense, it's an invitation for people who do serious writing to do serious writing well, poetic. Yeah. So part of the prompt for the book is 30 years of being an academic book editor and watching my authors write the same book over and over again, and finally grow tired of it. I don't know how many times I heard people say they were tired of writing an academic book because it was so boring and objective and detached. And so over the course of many, many years, I began to coach my authors to use some fiction techniques and apply it to their nonfiction academic work. And so really Mango Tree is the result of that. Now, its genre as a piece of poetry, prose poetry, and it is cryptic. One of the copy editors who first saw the manuscript wanted to add all the linking verbs that I left out back then.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and they wanted me to add all the adverbs that I had cut out. The road to hell is paved with adverbs. So I had eliminated them. And so it's intentionally compact. It was not a mistake to write like that. And so part of it is, as a piece of prose poetry, to invite readers to pause and linger over the craft of writing.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And, on my latest book with y'all, I had a copy editor who tried to throw in all the that's I had left out because I'm death on that's. And so I understand how that goes. But this book, for those who haven't read it yet, is written in brief sentences. It is written in incomplete sentences. You have abandoned all regard for the paragraph. As a convention in parts of the book. I think there's entire chapters that are one paragraph, it seems. So it not in a way of disregard, but I think in a way of intentionality, these things are as well. So it's an interesting example on that. I told my wife that after I had worked through the book that I felt like I'd watched a Wes Anderson movie in book form, just watched Asteroid City the other night, and it was like, oh, that's what that would be as a book. It's quirky, but beautiful. Love the movies, love the book. So you say early on here, just to quote yourself to you, I love this line. Books rarely make poets of people. Life does that. That's beautiful.
Well, it's true. Part of becoming a writer is having life squeezed out of you.
Yeah.
The pressures and the traumas and our hardships and our disappointments are the place you have to go to write. There's a joy to writing, and there's a healing to writing, and there's a fear to writing. Writing is to go to a place that you risk yourself. You leave yourself on every line, and you open yourself up for others to peer in. And writing is most of us want to cloak ourselves. We want to hide from others, and writing is a way of hiding. By the way, you can hide and not be found, but the kind of writing that wins the kind of response that you're hoping for, I think, begins with unveiling yourself on the page.
This is why I've never written fiction, because I figure people would see me through the fictionalized stories that I tell.
Oh yeah.
And it would be too confessional. I have a therapist for that. I don't need a book.
Well, the quote that's often attributed to Hemingway, which was not Hemingway, it was a sports writer who said that writing is easy. All you do is open up a vein. And that really does get at the sacrifice that's required for writing.
So with that beautiful thought, I want to back up now and talk a little bit about how you came to be involved in the process of publishing, because you came from an academic setting. You thought you were going to be a New Testament professor your whole life and an academic. And that's one kind of writing. We were talking before the webinar about academic writing and how that fits in. Take us from that journey, what you thought you were going to be doing, to what you ended up doing, and how that changed maybe your perspective on things.
It was on the 6th hole of a golf course there in Louisville that Marty Swords, a colleague at Louisville Presbyterian Seminary, took out his phone and called Davis Perkins at Presbyterian Publishing and said, you know, Carey Newman would make a great editor. And within about 3 weeks, Richard Brown and Stephanie Egnatovich, to whom the book is dedicated, Stephanie, I dedicated the book to Stephanie, met me on the east end of Louisville for a lunch, and I got hired, and I had no idea what I was doing. Zero. And it was a learning experience, to say the least. The first authors whom I published, I need to go back and apologize in many languages to them for the books that, I helped them give birth to. And it took a while. And one of the catalysts for me was the great Clayton Carlson, who had started Harper San Francisco. He'd left New York for Harper and went to San Francisco and founded Harper San Francisco and did religion publishing at Harper San Francisco. And then Harper San Francisco became Harper One. And everybody will know Harper One because it's the publisher for Tom Wright's trade books. And Clayton came and did a seminar, publishing seminar for Westminster John Knox. And it was in that weekend retreat at Shakertown that
beautiful.
I first was introduced to the glories of being an editor. A book into that would be the greatest book on publishing I know is Roberto Colasso's little volume, The Art of the Publisher. Colasso, he's just one of the greatest minds of our time and writer of our time. And I would recommend his posthumously published book on the Bible, The Book of All Books. which is the single best book I've ever read on reading the Bible. But that's an aside. Classo and Carlson really, in some ways, are bookends for my career in thinking about writing, publishing books, editing, all of it.
So, we share one thing in that a lot of the things we publish at BNG come out of either an academic or a pastoral context. And I'm editing a lot of pastors and academics along the way, as you have been and are still. And, there's different kinds of writing that I think we can easily explain. And academic writing is not book publishing writing or newspaper opinion, news site op-ed writing necessarily. And sometimes people have trouble making the leap from one, kind of style to the other. Was that difficult for you?
As a writer myself, or
as an editor?
As an editor, yes. Well, that's been the whole pilgrimage in some ways, is to learn how to help people speak in their own voice without using the first person pronouns. So the I and the we are just as detached in academic writing as third person. In fact, it may even be more so because it's the we presumes community when it doesn't exist, and the I is a fictional I on the page. So one of the first things that I do when I get a manuscript and I'm editing it is I tell my authors, no first person pronouns. You don't get first person. You get it in the notes and you get it in the preface. That's the only two places you can use first person. Secondly, no block quotes. You get one block quote from a non-primary source for every 500 printed pages. Use it wisely. Those two things right there are jarring to most scholars. And I say you cannot use the passive voice ever. Ever. And you get rid of all adverbs. You get rid of every introductory clause. Scholars love to write with a long introductory clause.
Right.
Qualify everything up front. Nope, can't happen. And there's about my book, Mango Tree, is not a tips and tricks book at all.
Right. I should have said that up front.
Yes, I had a final appendice where I was going to have my tips and tricks, and I decided no. That's exactly opposite the disruption that I wanted Mango Tree to be. Mango Tree is an interruption, is what it is. It's an intentional interruption, and it's a stop and think. And I didn't want to put the tips and tricks in, but I have them, and I slowly dole them out to my authors, because if I give them all at once, it really is shock therapy, and they typically want to go find a bed and curl up in the fetal position when I give it to them all at once. So I dole it out over several emails and several chapters and several instances, and slowly but surely, they start to find their own voice, their own style of writing. So yeah, I think it took 800 books in 30 years to be able to write Mango Tree.
So next time I write something for you, I'm just going to call myself the disciple Jesus loved. That gets around the first person.
You can do that.
I just finished teaching the Gospel of John in my Sunday school class for the last year.
Well, there you go.
Verse by verse. Look at me, right? So the single most formative person for me in learning how to write, which is also learning how to edit along the way, was a professor at the University of New Mexico named Tony Hillerman, who was a great novelist, wonderful wonderful stuff. And what we learned from Hillerman was just examples. Every class was a lab in writing where we went over our own work and he showed us how to make it better. It was this very thing. It was an ongoing full semester lab in working through your own stuff. And I do think sometimes people ask me, well, how can you write so fast? Or how can you edit this way or whatever? And I mean, I've been doing this 40 years in one form or another, right? And I think this is that there is probably a 10,000-hour rule in this, but not everyone has that advantage when they start to write. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are online with us today are in that boat where maybe they've never written for publication before. And it's a little daunting to get started, you know, because people have preconceptions or whatever. What do you tell first-time or second-time writers how to jump in the water?
Jump in the water. So there's several pieces of advice here. One, read good writing and think about the writing that you're reading as you're reading it. So there's a kind of reading that you do that you just get on the ride and let the author take you where the author wishes in the arc of the book. Then there's a kind of reading where you're watching how the author does what they do. Why are they doing that? How are they doing that? Why am I feeling sad right now? Why am I feeling as if I want to kiss the girl that the guy just described or was just described in the book? You know, you have to ask yourself about the reasons why your responses to the writing are as they are. And that's to get to the meta level of writing. So what you describe after 40 years is the meta discourse that you talk to, the inner conversation that you have as a writer. You're self-correcting your sentences even as they're coming out.
That's correct.
Right. So there's that, is to read good writing and then read people who write about writing. There's lots of books about writing, and some of them are actually good. I am very partial to Annie Dillard's little book, The Writer's Writing Life. I mean, it's an amazing book, and it's just filled with insights into the craft of writing. I'm also a fan of Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird. I think that's probably the most read and cited kind of scriptural text among those who write in religion, because Anne comes out of that kind of ethos and has always been in conversation with it. And one of the things that Lamont says about writing is you just got to vomit on the page. You got to vomit on the page. And I think that's, I'm in the middle of a novel right now, and that's what I do. When I finish a chapter, I start on the next one, and I just, regurgitate as much as I can. And I did that in my academic writing as well. It's just, you get down as much as you can, and then you start trying to find your line through it. The other thing that I would say is characters before plot. So in an academic writing, it would be ideas before argument in some ways, or ideas before a table of contents. In other words, ideas are people too. And if you treat them as a character in a story that you're telling about your subject, a book is not an argument about a subject. We call that a dissertation. A book is a story about a subject that insists its meaning. So Aristotle made a distinction between narrative and meaning. And if you read Northrop Frye on Aristotle, he makes hay with this and argues that to tell a story inside the hold of the story is the freight of meaning. And most of us go after the meaning in the academy without paying attention to the story. So one of the things that I would say to authors is be a good storyteller. Start telling stories.
Yeah.
Tell stories about your subject in the book. I have many little thought experiments I put my authors through, and one of them is what I call the fairy tale. I have them turn their book into a children's fairy tale they're going to tell someone right before they go to bed. And you have to do it in 3 paragraphs in under 5 minutes.
Mm.
And it starts with once upon a time.
Yeah.
And I have little prompts for the fairy tale. And it's amazing what this does. It actually disrupts the table of contents that they had, and it provides them with a new narrative table of contents.
Mm.
So, yeah. So how to start writing? Well, you got to vomit on the page. There's no one formula for it. Writing is not just add water. Writing is wrestling with the primal powers of this world, trying to harness the chaos out there and formalize it onto the page. I mean, it is really a magical kind of thing. And to think that somehow you can do it in 3 steps is to undermine writing itself. And that's why writing is boring.
Yeah.
If there's 3 steps to writing, everybody could do it.
It's an art, not a formula. Yeah. So
Yeah.
You touched on something a moment ago that I'd like to ask a little more about, and that is I deal specifically with writing about religion, or some people call it religious writing. It's not religious writing, that's the wrong use of the word, but writing about religion. And it seems that often people just disregard everything they may know about writing otherwise and try to write a Sunday school lesson because it's about religion, you know. How do you deal with this impulse that a lot of authors have to write like a devotion, not a book?
Yeah. So there's that is a second manifestation of what I like to call this is a rock writing. This is a rock. Rocks are heavy. Carrying heavy rocks makes you tired. Gee, I have a lot of rocks that I'm carrying right now, and I am tired. I mean, so the devotional writing that kind of breaks down the idea to these consumable bits and pieces, I think undersells our readers. I think it's an insult to their intelligence. I think people can handle very complex ideas. This is the Henry Kissinger principle. Henry Kissinger never shied away from talking about the complexities of the Middle East. He just did so in perfectly clear ways. Don't confuse the complexity of the subject with the complexity of how you're going to talk about the subject. So you can be clear and don't confuse something that is like the Gospel of John clear with the lack of profundity, because there is something profound about very clear writing. So one of the things that we do in religion writing is sometimes underestimate our readers. And we shouldn't be afraid of very complex ideas and even very complex sets of relationships among the ideas. And we as writers need to learn how to craft ways to talk about them so that readers can see the complexities and appreciate just how difficult some things are.
How is writing different than preaching?
Oh, what a great question. This is a great question because it gets at something that you and I were talking about earlier. So preaching, there's an immediate response to what you say. And you can tell when the sermon monster is eating your sermon between the pulpit and the first pew, and it's getting gobbled up before anybody even hears it because it's so bad. Or you on those rare Sundays that your sermon is like a thunderstorm and it's lightning and raining over the congregation and they're hearing and soaking themselves in what you're saying. There's this call and response to a sermon. A book is not anything like that. A book is written to itself, not to a flesh and blood audience. And I'd said to Mark earlier that a book is not written to readers. A book is written to itself.
Yeah.
So in this sense, a book is, it is performance, just like a sermon. But the performance of the book, the introduction is written to the conclusion, and the body of the book connects the prompt with its desired end. And so that this, and if you add notes to it, then achieving concord among the parts of the book is the goal of the book, the harmony that you achieve through the different parts. And each part has a different voice. The introduction's voice, the prose's voice, the notes' voice, and the conclusion's voice are all different. And what you're wanting is for them to sing in harmony with each other, not to be identical with each other. Most scholars, when they write, can move the notes to the prose, to the introduction, and move it all around without diminishment. And that shouldn't be the case. Each part of the book has a different role to play and a different voice to speak in. But you achieve harmony through the various parts. And the almost hermetically sealed harmony that you achieve with these parts is very different than a call and response and immediacy of a sermon. It's like lecturing to a class too, or talking to your friend over a beer. If you start telling a story and, the eyes start wandering off and not listening, as my wife does with me whenever I talk, you're not connecting. A book, there's no way to tell if the book is connecting or not.
Yeah, this is one of the interesting things I've learned, affirming exactly what you're saying, being a journalist for 21 years, being a pastor for 17 years, coming back into journalism. The work you do in local church ministry is with a certain set of people who you see every week, multiple times, and you are speaking to them and with them, and you have immediate feedback, and it's a loop. But writing, whether for a news service or for a book, really is a lonely experience because you are speaking to people you have very little interaction with.
You have zero interaction.
Yeah, I mean, certainly while you're writing. I mean, you might get some later, good or bad. So with that being said, would you make a case for the relevance of books at all today? I mean, everybody has a Substack and a blog and whatever.
A book is an act of incarnation. It's ideas having a corpus. The embodiment in the book is Eucharistic. And that's part of the underpinning of Mango Tree, is it's one of the origins. There's 3 or 4 origins for the book, and one of them is that it dawned on me that there was a theology of the book. And that was really the last section in the book. It's entitled Mythology in the book, but that came first. I wrote that first 5 years ago. And
side note, that's a great point. Often we write the ending first.
Oh yeah, you don't know it's the ending though.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much about discovery of writing that well.
Yeah. Back to your story.
Anyway, so part of the problem with the web is there's no embodiment. It's Gnostic. It lacks permanence. Whereas a book's a fixed page, for better or for worse, is needed. It's that act of fixing it on the page, and, darned if I didn't open up the book after I got my copies and find a typo.
Oh,
And within 2 minutes, I found it.
of course.
Yeah. And it was an easy one. And I'm sure that a copy editor corrected it wrongly. And
Of course.
yep. So,
Of course.
but that was fine. And there's a glory about that. The glory is that it's a marred glory. And writing for the web and writing blogs, this is short form. Writing, long form writing has its own architecture and its own pathos, and it's then the pedagogical value. There's a longitudinal study done about children who read long form stories. Their test scores are enormously higher. There's the benefits of reading Harry Potter as a child across all the volumes, or reading all of Tolkien, or reading Les Mis, or reading some grand imaginative arc of a book. There's real value to that you can't get from a blog.
Yeah, so let me pause. I have something else to say on that, but I want to pause. I forgot to say this earlier to those who are joining us online right now. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and start populating some questions you'd like to ask. We'll get to those in just a minute. I will be dishing them out as they come in. I should have said that earlier, but if you don't know how to do it, just scroll down to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a place where it says Q&A, and you can pop in questions there and we'll get to those. So back to this point we were just talking about, as a publisher of a news service that has a broad appeal, I get very frustrated with writers who are pretty good writers from different walks of life, who are enamored with having a Substack right now that 50 people are reading, and I can offer them thousands of people to read their work, but they would rather 50 people read it that they can control and get to directly. Drives me nuts because you could reach 1,000 times more people, but you got to give up a little control on it. And that's sort of like handing a manuscript over to a publisher, to an editor. This is not self-publishing in this. You don't have the final say on everything. And as an editor, I think that's a good thing.
Yes, and I talk about this in the book, that the sociology of publishing, the sociology of editors, sociology of the authorial experience, all of that is important. And most book authors don't do it enough in their life to be able to be knowledgeable about what's going on. And actually, a lot of authors don't want to know what's going on. They want the magic. And one of the images for the editor is shaman. I mean, you really are, there's something, high priestly. You come through and say some words, and you go back, and smoke comes up, and the book comes out, and people just don't understand how it happens. And it is an interesting world, and I describe parts of it. I don't demystify it all, and I don't think that demystifying publishing is necessarily a great thing. I think there's, I think some mystification of what it is to be published and to publish is important, because it is a kind of sacred act. But on the other side of it, most authors, even experienced ones, really don't understand their own detriment. And so they choose the wrong publisher, for example. And choosing the wrong publisher can have catastrophic effects to the number of readers, to your book success, to the kind of goals that you have for the book. And I was just visiting with a longtime friend and author yesterday over lunch, and he was describing to me what he's working on. And I said, Jim, what is your single goal for the book? And so he listed out 4 or 5. I said, no, this is a mutually exclusive choice. You choose one goal. And you have to choose from among the good, the better, and find the best that suits you. Are you writing for yourself? Are you writing to make money? Are you writing to be famous? Are you writing to win an award? Are you writing because you're running away from something? Why are you writing? What is the motivation? You've got to be brutally honest with yourself why you sit down every day and write. And oh, by the way, I haven't snuck this one in. Let me do it. Let me give a flashing light here to the secret of writing. And the secret is write every damn day. Sorry for the word damn.
Yeah. Oh, it's mild for us. So yeah.
Yeah, write every damn day. I have several of my authors who send me an email, and the subject line is every damn day. And we exchange back sentences. You can move a mountain one rock at a time. In fact, it's the only way you can move it.
Yeah.
So write every day. Pay yourself first and write every day. So people don't accomplish their goals because they don't sit down and write every day. Once you get in rhythm of writing every day, great things happen, even if it's for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I argue you ought to do it first. I'm a morning person, so there you go. But if you're an afternoon or an evening person, find your rhythm and write every day. But authors get frustrated when their books don't achieve their goals, and you've got to be ruthless in self-examination about why it is that you're writing, to know which publisher to take your manuscript to.
Yeah.
So that they can help you fulfill what it is you want. I call it the devil's triangle. It's mission. I want to do good in the world. Money. I want to make money.
Good luck.
Impact or fame or prestige. I want people to think well of me. So most authors will say, oh, I'm writing for right here in the middle, but it's the devil's triangle because it's 3-dimensional and it rises up like this, and there's a single point. And if you drop the ball down, it rolls to one of the in between you can get 2 of them, but you can't get all 3. And most of the time, we gravitate to 1. And so if you've got a mission manuscript and a mission goal, and you wrote it for missional reasons, find a missional publisher. And if you wrote it because you wanted prestige, find a prestige legacy publisher. And if you want to make money, go find a commercial house.
Yeah. So John, you've asked a question that I think this partly addresses about writing blocks of time you write every day and so forth. And the thing I would add to this, the first book I published with Fortress, I blocked out about 2 hours every weekday afternoon, left my office, this was pre-pandemic, left my office, went to different coffee shops around town, and I spent 2 hours writing. And it really does add up, over time with that. So you're talking about different publishers. I don't want to lose this, and we're going to get some other questions, and it's so much to talk about here. And you and I have had this conversation before as well, about people are pitching books, and you get these proposals all the time and have to figure out what do you take and what do you not take, and and we recently had this conversation with a friend who was pitching a book, and you weren't the right place for them, but you recommended some other place that might be the right place for them, and there's different things. How does an author who wants to be published sort out who these different places are and where they ought to make their pitch?
Inductively. So one of the ways to do it is to say, here are 5 books that I know about that's like the book that I'm writing. So then you look at the spines of the book to see who published it.
Mm.
So you reverse engineer. Another way to do this is to look in your bibliography. If you've got an academic book, you look in your bibliography, and here's what it says. Oxford, 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 Cambridge, Oxford, 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 Cambridge. Chicago, Yale, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a university press book, and oh, by the way, you've got a legacy university press book. So there's you work from your bibliography, you work from the book that yours is most like, or aspirationally, the book, a collection of books who have performed in ways in culture the way you want yours to perform. So, and get ready for disappointment. I mean, in this exercise, because I mean, just water in the face. I want my book to perform like Brene Brown's.
Who wouldn't?
Right. Well, and I've tried to write a book just like hers. Well, guess what? Brene Brown is struck by lightning. She's a cultural ventriloquist. She speaks in the language of culture. I don't know how she does it. She doesn't know how she does it. Mm-hmm. And she also is tapped into a cultural consciousness such that she's able to say in words that which is living at the very edge of culture and has never been said before. And she says it and everybody goes, oh my gosh, I read her stuff. I shouldn't say this online. Yeah. I read her stuff and well, I think, gee, I could do that. Well, I can't. And that's where formula is not a writing, and that there's just people out there who do it. And sometimes they're unconscious of the ways in which they do it. So get ready if you're going to go down the aspirational path of your book, because most of the time you're going to compare yourself to somebody who has been struck by lightning. Now, you may be struck by lightning too, you just don't know it. Every time I ever gave a publishing talk, there was always at least one person in the crowd that believed they were. Mm. And most of the time, they were an example of somebody who wasn't.
Right.
Most of the people struck by lightning don't know it.
I told you the other day my frustration on this as someone who's writing about religion and culture and politics every day of the week. And my tremendous frustration is here's Tim Alberta with his great book, The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, that's come out. And there's nothing in that book that we haven't been saying for 3 years every day on our website. And now he's got a best-selling book. He's everywhere because the lightning struck.
Yeah. So there are 5 elements to a book. Right author, right time, on the right subject, aimed at the right audience, at the right moment. Of the 5 elements, one is by far the most important. The right timing.
The right timing.
So if, so I want to surf. So I get a surfboard. I get the best surfing instructor ever. I get the best board ever. I learn how to wax the board. I learn where the biggest waves are. And I go to Hawaii at the right moment, and I'm at the right island, at the right surfing beach. And if there are no waves, guess what? I'm just sitting around paddling in the water. Or I could be off a Daytona Beach with nothing but a piece of plywood, never having surfed in my life, and a hurricane come charging up the Atlantic. And guess what I'm doing? Surfing.
Yeah.
Timing is everything. So I've tried to time books. I did a book on Mitt Romney and his Mormonism on the eve of his presidential run. Yeah. In fact, I got a lot of publicity, got interviewed by Publishers Weekly on timing a book, like I was some genius, right? And the book flopped. It just flopped.
I know.
Good book. And, there was such a slim window. And, I had visions of my author being on C-SPAN, on MSNBC, and, just also, no, none of it happened. It was the right book, right author, right subject, executed in the right way, but just at slightly the wrong moment.
That is a beautiful illustration.
It missed the wave. So these aspirations that we have for books are frustrating. And so, honestly, the best thing to do is to write the best book you can, find the best publisher, get a great editor, and be happy that you've done due diligence and sleep well at night. And let the gods of publishing take over. They'll do what they do anyway.
I'm going to move to some questions.
Right.
A couple we've already addressed. How do you know which publishers match your goal? I think we've addressed that one. This question is back to something you said early on.
One other thing. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, talk to people who have published with that a particular publisher, and get the inside skinny from somebody who's actually worked with them. So, yeah.
So I'm going to slip another question in on that sort of bridges where we were and what that question is. A lot of times I get questions from people who are writing who say, should I hire my own editor before I submit my manuscript? And that, I usually say, that's a waste of time.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think people just
there
want
are many reasons for that.
If
you so I like North African curry in my Moroccan lamb that I make. If you put Indian curry in it, I'm not going to like it so much. So you get an editor who puts Indian curry in, and I'm looking for North African curry, I turn it down.
You can harm yourself.
Once the book is baked, it's really hard to unbake it.
Yeah. So here's back to the earlier comment. Without using I, how do you relate an experience that is supporting a thought? I try to eliminate I and we, and it's extremely difficult, this writer says.
Yeah. Be a better poet. That's part of it. So there's some tricks to it. So if you're writing memoir, then that genre dictates the use of the first person. So if you're giving personal experience, it sounds like you're writing a memoir or memoirish work. So probably first person is okay. Now, if it's an academic work, or if it's a serious-minded piece of fiction, then that, or even nonfiction, there are ways around it, but it's hard. I will agree that if you've got an experience. So one of the ways to do that is to create a character other than yourself and let the character be that subject and slowly then back the character out of the prose so that it becomes just about the experience itself. So it's a subject problem at its core, that your experience is what you're writing about, not the I. So what is the experience? Describe the experience in the third person.
Okay, so I'm going to push back a little bit because in one of my books, which is the account of our church going through an LGBTQ inclusion process that Fortress published, it's parts of the book are telling the story of events that happened to me while I was there. And so there's really no way to tell that story, but it's a different kind of book.
Yes, it's dipping into a memoir genre.
Back into genre.
Yeah, that's a genre question. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question of the moment. How do you think AI will change books and writing?
Um, it's an interesting question. And I've got a book coming out on AI in the fall. And so I've been down this road. I've done a deep dive into this, and it's on the regressive nature of AI, that AI helps everyone but the poor. It's really an interesting argument that AI unduly affects the poor in harmful ways. But that's neither here nor there. So I guess you can fall in love with your refrigerator. And I guess you can fall in love with your microwave. And I guess you can fall in love with your computer. But I would rather have my wife, a real flesh and blood person who is not programmed, who, when she has a bad day, has prescience. And that prescience is unpredictable. And that unpredictability means that we can have sharp words and within 5 minutes say we're sorry. So to conceive of a book as the product of a machine and a machine alone, without prescience, without a flesh and blood sacrifice on the part of the author, is akin to falling in love with a refrigerator.
Yeah, I love that. I'm reminded of that series of books that's been published for some time. It's blankety blank for dummies, theology for dummies or revelation for dummies, and it just is the epitome of a formulaic kind of writing that's sort of mass produced back in that tips and tricks mode, right? And while there's a market for that, that's not poetry.
No. So another way to put this is what Alexander McCall Smith does, say in the Sunday Philosophy Club or in Irregular Portuguese Verbs, is very different than what Hemingway does. And I guess you can program AI to write different kinds of books, but the twists and turns of McCall Smith, who is a Scot, who's a lawyer, who lived in Africa, who knows academics, but who is mischievous and even peevish in the way he writes. It's whimsical. That kind of writing in his, and he writes in multiple genres. I think that just takes a human being.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Okay, let me move on. We answered this question sort of about finding an editor, but I think the variation on that is I think most people are just fortunate when they find someone who will publish accept their work, and you sort of have a roll of the dice about who you're going to get as an editor there, right? And hopefully most of the time you're fortunate, but maybe not, because people do have different perspectives, right?
Yeah, this is where doing some due diligence about editors. So there are some editors who are day traders. There are some editors who run a clearinghouse. There's some editors who are more like realtors. There are some editors. I mean, there's different tropes for understanding the editor. And I give several in the book. I talk about the editor. In one of the shorter chapters that had 3 or 4 paragraphs, Mark, I never wrote just a single paragraph in a section.
Okay.
And I sing the glories of the paragraph. In the section on paragraph, I actually say it's not the sentence that carries great writing. It's the engine room of writing is the paragraph, not the sentence. The sentence is the Miss Piggy of the paragraph. It tries to steal the show.
Yeah.
It's self-absorbed. And there are great sentences that take the microphone, but it's the paragraph that gets the coal shoveled into it that drives the great steamship of the boat of writing. Finding an editor is a hard thing to do. And if you start with looking for an editor that you want to work with, you're probably going to, I think you're right, Mark. You wind up at a house, and the house has editors, and then you hopefully have pitched the right person at the house. Because I've got colleagues, and we all operate differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We've got one last question here, and that is this: did you always want to write as a kid? This person says, "I'm still wondering if there's time for me."
Oh, yes. Yes. Absolutely. Start tonight.
Yeah. Well, you when you were at Better Press, you published one of our mutual friends who would have easily been 70, 75 when you published her with the story about her husband's death. And she's a beautiful writer, still writes for me today. And never too late, I think.
No. No, in writing, writing's a powerful thing. So I've been many things in my life. And Wayne Booth, himself a great writer and literary critic at University of Virginia, one of his very famous lines is, "You really don't know yourself until about your 3rd or 4th vacation." I think that's true. And I can remember when I would sit down on a plane and somebody asked me what I did, I would say, "Oh, I'm a New Testament scholar," or "I'm a graduate student." And then I would say, "Oh, I'm a professor." Then it was, "I'm an editor." And then it became, "I'm a publisher." I think that if you ask me today, I would probably say I'm a writer. Mm. Even though I'm still a publisher and an editor.
Yeah.
I think that writing hogs the TV changer of our calling once it gets a hold of us.
Very good. Well, we've reached the end of our hour, and I want to remind everyone this is the book, Mango Tree, right here. And it's a slim volume, but do not let that fool you. It is full of nourishment. It is packed with protein here and lots of great stuff.
Half the book are footnotes.
And then there's the footnotes. But some of the footnotes have illustrations.
Yeah.
So there's a few pictures in this book, if that matters to you. Carey, thank you so much. What a great conversation. This has been just a jam-packed hour of great wisdom. And thank you to everyone. Most everyone stayed online the whole time. So that's really great.
Because they had a drink. They poured a drink already.
They already poured their drink. It is 5 o'clock somewhere for sure.
Oh, yes.
Not in Waco and not in Dallas, but
it's soon going to be.
We'll have this online tomorrow, and feel free to share it. We'd love for you to share it with others. And thanks for reading BNG and being with us.
Support independent faith-based journalism. Baptist News Global.